this is a hard one. How many people spent more than 6 hours to get here this week? Round of applause. Wow, that is awesome.
I know there's people who have driven. I want to say, okay, so I'm going to steal something from our good friend Jay Morales.
Yes.
Congratulations on making an investment in yourself.
Absolutely.
Because let's face it, you can see a lot of these talks online.
Absolutely,
right?
yes.
You can go online and watch a lot of things from Dr. Barry and a lot of things.
The only thing is, Joe, I don't have any legs online. I have an entire bottom half. Everybody has have you seen everybody's bottom half today? It's kind of exciting.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a bottom half.
That's right. But here's the thing. You can see everything online for free, so why come here? Number one, like we said before, community. But number two, when you put $1 on it, you pay more attention.
Yes.
And I remember when we were in Omaha last year, and I'm sorry, I'm going to see it. Jay, if you're watching this, I'm sorry, but it was really, really good. And he's like, why do we pay to go to a concert? You can buy the CD or download it on iTunes or however you listen to music. Why do we pay for the experience? But when we put $50, $100, $200 on going to a conference, it makes us go like, hey, I'm paying to be here. I better open up my mind. We're not folding laundry and, feeding the cat.
I need to fold laundry.
And so congratulations on making an investment in yourself.
Yes, and this is an opportunity for us to learn something new, brand new. I mean, the speakers coming here are just bringing it. Are you noticing that? Are you learning things that you have not heard before? Clap your hands if you're hearing some new stuff today. That is awesome. We had the privilege yesterday of riding with our next speaker home.
I'm excited about this one.
From the Redmond Mind. And if you didn't already love her, which I already love her, I just loved her so much more. She was talking about why she attends conferences and how excited she gets when a speaker says something that makes her say, what?
Right.
What? Because it's new information and it's so exciting, and it means that this adventure does not stop. We've got more to learn in this journey, and I'm excited today because I know that Kim Howerton is going to have many moments for me and for you that I'm really super excited about.
She actually said something to us. We interviewed her in Omaha last year, and going back to Dr. Lenski, she helped us with a big stress management last year when we were talking to her, and she talked about sometimes we get diet fatigue.
I was like, that is exactly how I feel about it.
The best way to break a stall is to not diet.
I was like, that's unthinkable. I've been doing it since I'm 4.
That was a what moment, right?
It was a what moment.
And you recently experienced that, right? Because I reminded Rachel, I'm like, you just went 6 months without gaining a pound
or losing
by just not
worrying
about it.
It was like a breakthrough. I'm used to whiplash, right? So it was so exciting. Well, let me tell you about this hot lady coming up today. Kim Howerton had been a life coach for a decade when she went keto. She soon realized that she herself was stuck in the very same kind of self-defeating belief loop she'd seen so many clients through. Unaware of how good she could feel, she spent decades in a body in ever-declining health, making the best of what she thought was an unfixable body. Once she realized how amazing she could feel when she stopped poisoning herself and allowing her health to improve, she realized there could be no better service to the world but helping others clear away their own health roadblocks. In addition to working with clients, she can be found spending her days and nights running the podcast Keto Life Support, blogging, and theketonist.com, and making keto recipes for her cookbooks, meal plans,
which are really good, by the way.
They're amazing, and it is amazing to get to introduce Kim Howerton.
Thank you. I'm having like flashbacks to high school. I didn't learn my lines. I don't know what's going on in the play. All right. Hi, I am Kim Howerton. It is really exciting to be here with you. I'm not used to using a clicker, so we're gonna go with that. So, Hold on a second, I'm waiting for some slides to come up. How's everybody doing? Yeah? I mean, it's been great so far. I'm so excited to be here with you guys. So I'm Kim Howerton. I am a coach. I'm a keto coach. I run a podcast, as they said, Keto Life Support. And today I'm going to talk to you about how to stop the struggle, why people fail at long-term weight loss success, and how to be successful. So that's me on a sofa, in case you wanted another view. Yeah, and you can see I do have a lower body because we've been doing so much remotely. So these pants are new. I do want to disclose that I do sell books and coaching and courses about health and weight loss. And my focus of my practice at this point is on stalls and people who have difficulty losing weight. I also have another disclosure that I didn't put on the slide, but I can tell you about it. So my first job was as a standardized test prep teacher. I taught people how to take the SAT for a short period of time in college. I was actually recruited to do so because, strangely, I am really good at standardized tests. And so I went, it gets worse, don't worry, that wasn't a real brag. So I went and they were like, we would love to have you teach because your score was really great. It's like, great. So I got up in front of the class of high school students looking to take the SAT, looking for knowledge about how to improve their SAT score. And I said, okay, so you're going to read the question. Then there will be 5 choices. One of those answers will appear to be right to you. And you'll pick that one. And nobody's scores got any better because I was just naturally skilled at that particular skill. By the way, totally useless in adulthood. SAT scores, they lie. They tell you these things matter. They don't really matter. But I ended up quitting that job because I wasn't helping anybody. Because the thing that I was just good at by happenstance, by luck, I didn't learn how to fix it. And so the thing I did have to learn how to fix was my body. I had struggled with my weight pretty much my entire life. And I thought it wasn't fixable. I tried diets, I tried weight loss, I sometimes succeeded for a brief time, and I just couldn't get where I wanted to go. So several years ago, I found a podcast and heard the word keto for the first time. And from there, I was able to drop over 100 pounds and learn a lot about the process of weight loss because I did the thing that we all do, and it seemed so easy, and then it got really hard, and I thought, I must be broken. I went back to those mindsets about this being too hard. And so today, what we're going to talk about is weight loss as an outcome. I wanted to bring this up specifically because I think we all in this room know it's not just about weight loss, right? I think you come for the weight loss, you stay for the health, right? But some of us really still do want weight loss, and it is part of our overall health picture. So I'm going to talk specifically about weight loss today. And I'm going to use the term weight loss, or I'm going to try to, rather than fat loss, although I think fat loss is actually more important than just weight loss. Most of the studies I'm talking about specifically focus on weight loss, so I'm just trying to be consistent. I'm also going to be talking primarily about mindset and habits rather than the physical aspects. A lot of amazing people are here at this conference this weekend, and they're going to talk about all sorts of things, but I figured the physical stuff might be covered more, so let's talk about the mental stuff, because as a coach, that's what I focus on a little bit more. So we have this assumption, right? We have this assumption that we make a plan, we decide to lose the weight, we climb the weight loss staircase, we get to the top, we hit the target, and we're done. That's what we think should happen, right? But really, the staircase is a little more treacherous. People fall through it, they fall off it, and sometimes they just leap from the top. And so I want to bring this up that there is this thing that happens, especially on keto, right? There's this lock and key fit. I had that with standardized testing. I would have paid some serious money to have it with my body weight instead, by the way. But just like there's just this thing, you do the thing and the thing works, and you're like, oh, magic, right? And we know those people. We know those people. They went keto, they dropped the carbs. I mean, some of these people are just like, I stopped drinking soda and lost 100 pounds. And you're like, awesome. But some of these people in the keto community, it is awesome. I'm happy for them. I am not them. And so what I want to point out is there is something called survivorship bias, right? We don't hear from the people that quit. We hear from the people that succeed. And so we get this idea that it's supposed to be easy, that the people that are talking have the important things to say. Sometimes the people with the most important things to say don't feel like they should talk. And so I think it's very important to talk about failure and the feeling of failure. So it's not really hard to discern why we think this weight loss thing should be easy. And you have to kind of look a little closer at some of the promises were made to see why it's not true. We watch reality TV. I put reality in quotes. We watch this show where they lose amazing amounts of weight. It's called The Biggest Loser. It's a competition about weight loss, which I don't really, but I watched it, and I used to think it was real-ish. Yeah, I knew, it was a little bit. I knew they picked scenes, and no, but we were told, like, this weight loss is possible in a week if you just, like, want it enough, and you just dedicate yourself to it, right? The reality is, what they told you was a week was 2 or 3. That all their food was supplied, that they were locked in a house where they weren't allowed to leave and access any other food. They had no real interaction, no responsibilities, no job other than losing weight. They exercised for over 8 hours a day, often to the point of vomiting. So like, just let's throw some bulimia in there, right? Like it's a lot going on. Their focus was on dropping scale weight, not on body fat, and that can often be to the detriment of your long-term success. Let's talk about the news. So this is on the stands right now, Women's World Magazine, and this is Lisa. Lisa is actually my client, so I know a lot about Lisa, and she gave me permission to talk about her. And it's actually true what it says here, that Lisa Bronstein lost 151 pounds and watched her blood sugar drop 170 points. Lisa actually went keto because she is a type 2 diabetic and wanted to fix that. But notice it says drop 16 pounds in 10 days. So Lisa is amazing. Lisa is much more amazing than the story would let you know. But Lisa did lose 151 pounds. She lost it over 4 years. When I did the math, that averages to 1 pound every 10 days, not 16. Now, that's an amazing rate of loss. That is so good and should be celebrated, but that will never make a magazine cover. Can you imagine if the magazines said that? Lose 1 pound in the next 10 days. Amaze your friends, right? That doesn't happen. We see a lot of fake weight loss ads. Well, they're real ads. They would actually like your money, but they're fake photos and fake promises. This is Gabor Sidebe, who's an amazing actress. This is not a real photo situation, though. She did have weight loss surgery, and she did lose a considerable amount of weight. But you can see an after of a considerable amount of weight is not what we're often sold we might look like. Then I'm going to say it. Weight loss coaches. Hello. We are at fault. We have to do better at making legitimate and realistic promises. Because when you run ads that tell people they can lose a gazillion pounds by Monday, look, this client did it, and you're like, yeah, the first week when they dropped a bunch of water weight, let's not set that expectation. Because who's done the math, right? I have Excel spreadsheets to prove it. If I lose 5 pounds the first week, the second week I'll be at 10. In 1 month, I will be a size 2, right? We've all done that progression. I've never had that progression happen. We've been set up. And I'm going to be honest, right? We set ourselves up. It is a cycle. We want to believe it. Can anyone guess what the number one question I get when I tell people that I've lost over 100 pounds is? How long did it take you? And I always think that is the thought in your head that will mean that you won't do it. When people ask me, how long did it take you? I would actually place money that they will fail. Everyone kind of asks it. I'm not saying you can't overcome that mindset, but as long as you cling to that mindset, you will fail. There's going to be someone in here who's like, I didn't fail. Most people will fail. I'll put it that way. We prize speed, effortlessness, and extreme, right? Like extreme weight loss, extreme makeover. Remember that show? That show was scary. Doubt me? I just found this magazine like 2 days ago. Lazy keto, lazy whatever, like take your pick of whatever. I mean, it's just an interpretation. It's not actually the title that gets me. 100+ ways to get healthy without changing your life. Isn't that the point? To change your life? I mean, people are like, I would love everything I ever wanted as long as I don't have to do anything. Can we make that happen? No. We're hope addicts. Some of us would rather fail and be hopeful than be realistic about what is possible for us. Because hope feels so good. You know, it's been many, many years since I had a Sunday where I dreamed about my Monday diet. But do you know that thing where, like, Sunday night you're like, Monday is gonna be the day that I start my new life. And, like, Monday afternoon, you're like, not this Monday, right? But that Sunday night feeling is really intoxicating. You're like, I'm gonna do this. It's gonna be awesome. I'm pumped until breakfast. And then no, that was not as fun as I thought it would be. So I'm sorry that I'm shattering the fantasy for you guys. I come by my nickname, honestly, Captain Killjoy. I'm here to destroy your dreams. But the reality is, I think that by being realistic, human, right? We have a chance. We have a chance that we don't have in fantasy land. We don't live there. We'll never live there. Fantasy is somewhere else. So I wanted to share a little more. There's this study by Gary Foster et al. And it's called, I call it the dream weight study. They looked at 60 women, average weight of 218 pounds, variety of heights, but giving you averages here or else we'll be here all day. And they did a 48-week intervention. So these people were entering into a diet program. And they asked them to fill out a questionnaire. What would be their dream weight, their happy weight, their acceptable weight, and their disappointed weight? By the way, what's funny, when I told my boyfriend about this study, he was like, so the disappointed weight would be they'd gain weight? And I was like, oh, no, they still lost weight. These were the definitions. So you would be disappointed if you were a weight that is less than your current weight, but one you could not view as successful in any way. You would be disappointed if this was your outcome. Acceptable was a weight that you would not be particularly happy with, but you would accept. You're not giving it back, right? As it is less than your current weight. Happy weight, not as ideal as the dream weight, but would feel pretty good about achieving it. And the dream weight, the weight that you would choose if you could weigh whatever you wanted. Like no basis in reality. Tall, short, bones, no bones, right? Whatever you could weigh. And then they asked them these, and they came up with these numbers. So the disappointed weight, if they over those 48 weeks lost 38 pounds, a 17% body weight loss, they would feel disappointed. Anything less, that or less. Acceptable, about 55 pounds, 25% of their body weight. Happy was 31%, about 68 pounds. By the way, they also asked them their target weight, like what they planned to lose in the program. This happy was the closest. It was actually 70 pounds, it was a little bit more. And the dream weight was a loss of 84 pounds, 39%. So that, if I'm doing the math right, I think that was going from like 218 to like 134 in this program. Actual. They averaged 35 pounds, which is amazing. So good. They were below disappointed. Below, right? Now, I do have a little bit of good news. They asked them afterwards, like, are you disappointed? And they were like, I don't know that I'd use the word disappointed. It might be acceptable, but they weren't happy. We overestimate what we can do in the short term and underestimate what we can do in the long term. And I would say that because we overestimate what we can do in the short term is why we don't do as well in the long term. So a little reality check. Virtual reality, media, weight loss stories, not always real. And then it's not just about the losing of the weight, it's about the keeping of the weight off the body, right? Because I think we can all kind of agree that if you just got down there and like bounced back up like you were on a bungee cord, it's not really long-term success. And this slide is intentionally vague, by the way, because it's picturing weight loss in the real world, and I will tell you studies about real world, wow, that is a tongue twister. Real world weight loss really suck. They're not very good, not very accurate. Because I think free-living people don't give very good statistics about success. Tends to be also the unsuccessful people don't tell you things. But best case scenario, what we can see is at about the 2-year mark, the best case scenario seems to be that about 20% of people will have kept a good portion of weight off that they've lost. Some stats say 5%. Those seem a little bit iffy. They're actually from a limited number of studies. But the other thing to know is that of the people that regain the weight, the pink guys, some of them do keep a good portion of it off. But the majority of people who regain the weight don't just regain the weight they lost. They bring some extra friends and they regain more. So that if you took like the average of all these people together, the group would weigh more than when they started, even including the people that maintained their loss. Yeah, I wasn't kidding about the Captain Killjoy part, in case anyone was confused. But don't get defeated, stay with me, it gets better. We're gonna get hopeful in a minute. Because there are weight loss success stories. Raise your hand, yell it out, clap it up. Who feels like they've achieved some level of success on their journey thus far? Right? Because you guys are dedicated, you're here, you're putting in the work. And there's also something called the National Weight Control Registry. This is a registry of over 10,000 people. And to get into this registry, you have to have lost at least 30 pounds and maintained it for at least a year. So these people are success stories. And when you average this group, they've lost an average of 66 pounds. Their average BMI went from 36 to 24. By the way, I know BMI, not a perfect measure, but with groups of people, you can track it. And the average maintenance is actually over 5 years. And 55% of them say they have ongoing weight loss desires. So they lost some weight. They may want to lose some more weight, but they're doing well with where they've gotten to so far. And then they study these people. They run studies on what makes people successful. And this is Spreckley et al. Did a systematic review. So there are individual studies about different components of weight loss, and then Spreckley and her group took those studies and reviewed them and came up with some important notes for us that we'll talk about today. So let's talk first about behaviors that impair weight loss management. So these are the not to-dos. Don't worry, I'm going to end on a high note. Okay, we're going to get to the good stuff at the end. The first one was lack of preparation and scheduling. So if you don't prepare, you have less of a chance of succeeding. Hopefully not surprising. But a lot of us, myself included, kind of fly by the seat of our pants people. I prefer to be spontaneous. Mostly because I'm always running late and I don't like to plan things, right? It's a character flaw. I'm working on it. But It doesn't have to look like little prepared packaged box meals all in your fridge with like days of the week on them. It's the appropriate level of preparation for you. Might just mean, having the right stuff in your fridge. So the other thing that was noted is they did not schedule things, especially things related to their health. Not good is not monitoring. So you can monitor lots of things, but they weren't monitoring weight, they weren't monitoring measurements, they weren't monitoring health markers. Not monitoring things tended to lead to regain. People who regained the weight tended to see weight loss as a finish line. I did it. I got there. I won. Remember the swan dive off the top? That's these people, right? Because they often did not maintain that. Their motivations tended to be more metrics-based. What are metrics? Like numbers-based, right? So it was a dress size, a weight, right? A metric-based goal tended to actually have less success. Their life was full of people that I would call doubters, criticizers, and skeptics. They allowed people into their hearts, right? Into their space, into their circle, who criticized them, who told them they couldn't do it, who just kind of looked at them funny a lot, right? These people being included in your heart can really bring you down. They spent a lot of time feeling deprived. They reported very high on feeling deprived. And I just like the picture of the dog, so we had to go with that. They felt at the mercy of social pressure. So, it's not that you can always avoid social pressure, but they felt out of control about it. Whether it was lunch with friends and they didn't feel that like they could order their own thing, or grandma's cookies, and they felt like they couldn't say no. They did not have healthy coping skills and treated eating as their main coping skill. I know that one, right? Before this keto experience, like literally my only life skill was eating. Sad, eat. Happy, eat. Bored, eat. It was always available. And it was very useful when I was a depressed 9-year-old. I just want to stop for a second and say, for some of us, we have struggled with more than our weight. And I did. I had massive depression by the time when I was in elementary school. And for a while, eating helped. It's helpful for some things. When you lack any skills of emotional self-regulation when you're a little kid, eating is the easiest way to do it. Unfortunately, my coping mechanism became a bigger detriment at some point than useful. The balance tipped. And then I had to address that as well. But along the way, while I was leaning on food as my coping skill, as my friend, I let it be everything. And I didn't develop the healthy coping skills that apparently I had no idea some people do develop along the way, right? Friends, talking to people, exercise. That as a coping skill, that seemed really nuts to me. But emotional eating, not really great problem solving. They tended to have a fixed mindset. So fixed, not like fixed opposite of broken, fixed like the opposite of flexible. They saw things rigidly, right? Black and white, good, bad. Like, I had one cookie, the day is ruined, right? Not, I had a cookie, all right, whatever. Okay, I'm going to stop for a second and really go into this one because it's huge with my clients, so be a little disproportionate amount of time on this. But not understanding scale fluctuations was brought up as a huge source of people ending up giving up on their weight loss efforts. So I'm going to give you a little study here. Let's take Sarah, for example. Sarah weighed herself. She started her diet on a Friday. By the way, I'm using the word diet to mean like a period of weight loss approach, right? And we all know we all have a diet, it's just what we eat. But when I use diet here, I'm going to talk about a concentrated time someone's trying to lose weight. She starts her diet on Friday, she weighs 200 pounds. Next Friday, weighs 200 pounds again. Following Friday, 200 pounds. Last Friday, 200 pounds. Sarah's not okay. Sarah is very frustrated. So Sarah does something I call the pile-up. When we have poor coping skills, they tend to come in groups, right? So she's going to add some emotional eating to the situation and throw in a little fixed mindset. I am broken. I can't lose weight. I've been trying so hard. So that's like the recipe for failure stew, right? Has anyone experienced something like this feeling in them? Maybe. I did a lot. But what if Sarah actually could see what her weight was doing every day? She'd see that, yeah, it happened to be up on those Fridays, but in between, it was down. It was up, it's down, it's up, it's down, it's up, it's down. This is what weight does. And if she actually averaged out all of those 22 days, she would have seen she was averaging a loss of about a pound a week. It just was really bad luck that she happened to weigh on the days that her weight was up. Maybe she always went out to a certain restaurant on Thursdays and they used a lot of salt and just water weight fluctuations happen. There can be a variety of reasons. Maybe she did her hardest workouts on Thursdays. That can make people maintain a little more water. So there could have been a number of reasons, but because she only looked at little snapshots and she made the weight mean something. So I'm not saying you have to weigh yourself every single day. It's a method to manage this. But what you can't do is believe incomplete data. Because the weight will fluctuate. There is a 2% variance just from being a human. Just goes up and down. So I'm going to pause for a second. This isn't actually on the list of why people fail, but I felt like it was, I got my opportunity, I'm going to take it, because it's an important point. We also see this, which is you weigh yourself once a week, and this person is by the end of that 3-week period, is like, I'm doing so awesome, this is going somewhere. And then that was actually the week, or the 3 weeks. And then this is what it actually is going on. If you happen to weigh a day earlier or a day later, you would have decided that you either lost 3 pounds, gained 3 pounds, or stayed the same weight. You can't look at too little of a data set and make it mean something. You have to wait for more time to go by. So this is what ends up happening, right? This is a client of mine, Julie, she's awesome. She gave me permission to use this. She spent a whole week going up and down, a whole year going up and down these 5 pounds. This is how you fool yourself into thinking something is happening, and suddenly, well, I don't know, I have this experience. I'm like, how am I 45? How did that happen, right? I mean, time just goes by, and it's the same. You're like, how have I been doing this keto thing for 3 years, and I've weighed the same thing for a really long time? It makes you feel like you don't know what you're doing. But the reality is, if we don't put our eggs in the basket of thinking something's happening with shoddy data and we wait to see true change, then we'll get stuck. But you can turn the tide. You have to watch the trends. So I just wanted to really bring it home about the weight thing, that you can fool yourself in multiple directions. And I see this just take people down, out at the knees, just gone in both directions. They waste years, or they give up all the time. And so I just want to say, you are not based, your worth is not based on what you weigh, but it is an important data point if you're trying to lose weight. It's a metric. So, okay, we're getting to the good part now. How to win at losing. I like to be a loser. All right? I once really embarrassed, it's a long story. Anyway, I'll go to later. But so what do these people do? These people here, they are successful losers. What do? They self-monitor, whether that's their weight, their measurements, their health metrics. They use metrics, numbers, figures, to keep track of their progress. And this is after they've reached maybe their goal weight even. They do action tracking, either tracking their macros, journaling, portion control, meal timing, calorie tracking. It doesn't matter which one it is. They all are successful, but they're staying connected to the fact that they have to change their actions and take different actions on a daily basis. They create healthy boundaries and a sense of self-worth. I mean, that sounds amazing. I like that one. How do they do that? They meal plan, they exercise. Isn't that funny? We think like healthy boundaries. It's like, I can't do that. That sounds like a grown-up person does that. Has anyone else ever thought, like, who's the grown-up? I don't know. I think it might be me, but that's crazy. But you do like meal planning, and that could look like anything, as I was saying earlier. Like, do you have meat in the fridge? Can be meal planning, right? It doesn't have to look like any one thing, but it has to happen in the way that works for you. They exercise, they plan it, they time it, and it can look like a variety of exercise, right? The most common exercise was walking that people did, but they did it consistently. People who maintained their weight did. They're intrinsically motivated. So rather than being motivated by a metric, like a scale weight, a dress size, something external, they're motivated not by a thing, but what that thing gets them. So here we got grandpa pushing his granddaughter on the bike, teaching her to ride a bike. If you can't walk because your joints can't take it, you can't do this, right? So this intrinsic motivation, it's not that I want to weigh a certain weight, it's that I want to do certain things. What will that weight get you? Because the weight in and of itself doesn't get you much. But what you can do when you change your life, when you change your body, that gets you something. They went into holidays or social events with a plan. Now, you might be surprised, some of you here, to know that plan sometimes meant they would eat the things at the holiday table, but they knew going in what they would do. They knew, okay, there's going to be this, there's going to be that. I might have that because it means something to me. I won't have that because it's not very good and Aunt Sally can't cook. But if they were going to a restaurant, they looked at the menu ahead of time. They sometimes brought food with them to places because they knew that that was safer for them. So again, it doesn't have to be, it's not all the same. We're not all the same, just like Dr. Lenska said. We all have different ways that we proceed, but you have to know what works for you and find a way to stick to it. They had a problem-solving orientation. To think your life won't have adversity is a fantasy, right? Every life has some level of adversity. And if we have food as any level of a coping skill, it's going to be real hard to not go there in that time that is challenging. When things are going well, it's a lot easier. Unfortunately, you can't schedule the bad things. It's like, the breakdown, we'll do that in January, right? It's not the way the world goes. It's gonna come upon you unexpectedly. And so you have to, in the good times, you have to be laying the skills, right? Figuring out what works for you, having a problem-solving mentality, and knowing how to navigate your trigger foods. Because your trigger foods are not your trigger foods are not your trigger foods. Oh, and also creating new coping skills, right? Because we've determined, hopefully, that eating is not a good coping skill. So you have to find some replacements, some people to talk to. Might be therapy, might be a friend, going out in nature if you like that sort of thing, funny movies, things that help you that aren't about food. Oops. Stress management. So finding stress management. Stress is the thing that takes most people down. For a lot of people, they listed exercise as being a good stress management technique. Almost 300-pound me would have said they were insane because exercise was like the most stressful thing I could think to do. I actually once bought a URL called Gung No because I was like the opposite of excited to do anything physical, right? And I don't even know who I am anymore. Like I look forward to going to the gym, and I am having an identity crisis. I don't know, but it's good. I like it. But it doesn't have to look like anyone else's stress management. What brings you comfort, what makes you feel good, that doesn't also set you back, right? It has to be a net positive. Successful losers, they had a continuous goal setting. So rather than like crossing the finish line, oops, I'm losing an ear thing, hold on. Rather than crossing the finish line, they looked at it like surfing. You get up on the board. I don't surf, but I think this is what they do. They get up on the board, and if you immediately fall off the board, you got to get back on the board, and you got to, right? Because surfing is not about getting on the board; it's about staying on the board, as far as I know. If I'm wrong, please correct me. But to be a good surfer, you need to be on the board, not under the board, right? So once you get somewhere, you have to set a new goal. You have to set a new goal. You have to set a new goal. And that goal might just be maintenance, 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 right? Because for the longest time, you were like, another 5 pounds. I want another 5 pounds. Let me get another 5 pounds. And then, like, you get there. You're like, I don't know what to, I've never been here before. I don't know what to do. Another goal, stay there. And then expand the goals. I want to run a 5K. I'm not at that goal yet, but whatever it is, right? Or I want to take a yoga class, or I want to play with puppies. I don't know what it is, but set new goals, set more goals, things that are going to make you connected to long-term health. They had social support, whether that was just friends who would say, like, atta girl, you're doing really good, or people that would do things with them, go to a class, ate the same way they did, right? A lot of us have this, right? Okay, is anyone not in like some sort of Facebook group or follow somebody on Instagram that inspires them? I think in this day and age, right, like you're here, so I've answered the question, right? Look to your left, look to your right. They're here. We have social support. We have these people. Even if the people in your immediate life aren't those people, because sometimes they aren't, it's okay. Add these people to your life. You can just add good so that you don't have to rely on the less good, right? I'm not saying anybody has to like cut out the doubters, but maybe don't talk to them about your desired weight loss, because you know what they're going to say. Maybe you talk to them about golf, their life, right? Don't expect support from people that don't readily give it. It's a sad fact, but you can protect yourself from people who have not done their work by doing yours. Structured support, so things like coaching, that was listed. I'm not being totally, I don't know, it might be my profession, but getting some coaching has been helpful. And having a flexible mindset as opposed to the fixed mindset. So being able to think something went wrong, it's okay, I can fix it. This didn't go according to plan, that's all right, I'll roll with it. Starting to get out of black and white thinking. Thinking like a problem solver. And I'm going to just bring up the Virta 2-year results. You guys all know, of course, Virta. We've talked about the amazing Sarah Hallberg. But Virta is an intervention for people with type 2 diabetes. And in their 2-year results, what did they find? That the weight was down 12% in their cohort. Of 74% of the people that started that program were still with it. And there was a 29% reduction in metabolic syndrome. Why am I bringing this up? Well, it's actually a great demonstration of the skills. So there's a little note under the weight down. So a weight loss, compared to average weight loss programs, which average about 6% weight loss in the same time period, Virta was twice that much. And if you compare it to like just a random group of people in the population, they would be up 5%. So compared to doing nothing, it was a lot better. But I want to point out that Virta is not a weight loss program. It's a health program. They're helping people turn around their diabetes, their type 2 diabetes. That's intrinsic motivation. They did twice as well as the people that are focused on the metric, on the weight loss. So by focusing on what does it get me, where am I trying to fix in my life, what am I trying to be able to accomplish, you can get farther than if you just focus on the number. It was a structured program. There was coaching. They were tracking and monitoring. They had a little app. There was stress management. They had them plan for events. There was meal planning in that app. And so you can see that it's happening in our community, that we're taking these skills. The people that started Verta, they're not dumb. They know the successful skills. And they created a program that included them. And I just wanted to point this out to say these pieces, they all go together, and you can see how you can take one skill and build on it, and add another skill and build on it, and just go towards the habits that take you towards more success. So time after time. So the great news is the longer people maintained, the longer they maintained. So if they could get to a year, they were more likely to get to 2. They got to 2, they were more likely to get to 3. 3 years actually predicted 5, and then 5 to 10. So it just exponentially grew because the skills that got you the weight loss that you developed over the weight loss, you were practicing them as you were losing the weight. You cemented them in the maintenance, in the successful maintenance you were having. And by the way, maintenance doesn't mean you reach like your end goal. Remember, at the beginning, 55% still wanted to lose more weight. But where you are, if you're not gaining or losing weight, you are maintaining, right? So sticking with it and reinforcing those behaviors. I'm sorry if I make anyone feel drunk that I keep dancing around. It's just how I do. Identity was a huge piece. They felt like a new person. They talked about this. They used the word reinvention. They used that word frequently. They reinvented their life. They reinvented their identity, who they were. They went from a person that was unhealthy to a person that prized health. They went from a person that thought exercise sounded like the worst torture to someone that, I went to the hotel gym. I mean, some of you are like, why is she so shocked? I was shocked to be in a hotel gym. I have never gone to. Hotel felt like, a vacation. What do you got to do? Room service is what you get at a hotel, right? Not the gym. But I went, and I was like, I don't know who I am anymore. Reinvent your identity. Think about who you want to be. You get to decide. Because growing up till now, I just think we're kind of like a cobbled together coping mechanism sometimes, right? Like things happen, we figure out how to make it work. We're like wrapping ourselves with duct tape just to get through the year. But weight loss, turning your health around, it is an opportunity to like put a stake in the ground and say, this is who I am becoming. And you get to do that. You get to decide. These are some of the studies I talked about in case you wanted to take note of them. I'll provide this for anybody that wants it. And that is what I had to tell you about today. So thank you so much for joining me. You can find me at kimhowerton.com. And just so you know, a lot of these skills I talked about, they require habit formation. And it just so happens that last year at Keto Salt Lake, I talked about habit formation. So if you want to watch that video, if you haven't, put them together and you'll be on your way. So thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. Are you so excited that Captain Killjoy came this morning and spoke?
Oh, thank you.
I enjoyed that so much because I was definitely one of those people who shopping in the grocery store expected that from the time I took a magazine from the checkout line and rolled it to my car, I should have already lost 5 pounds, right? Because my intention was there. So I love that she's given us a realistic view about moving forward in our journey.
And I love the fact because she talked about everybody is different. When I did keto, when I started 5 years ago, I lost 20 pounds in the first month. Rachel came on with me only to save our marriage because she was eating nothing but oatmeal and yogurt every day, 500 calories a day for 2 years. That was her diet. She lost 100 pounds and then gained 70 doing the same thing, never changing anything. She came on to do keto because she was going to kill me because I was eating bacon and steak, and she was eating oatmeal.
Come on. I think that was justified.
The problem is after 3 weeks, she didn't lose 1 pound. So she was like, this doesn't work. So she went back to oatmeal. And we're different. But then when she came on the second time, she only lost 4 pounds in a month. But she dropped, was it 3 sizes?
3 sizes.
So we're all different. And I'm glad that Kim was able to point that out. And if you are not on her Facebook group, go on there. I am like in her Facebook group. I learn something every day. And I will honestly say I have never seen somebody as active in their own Facebook group, including us, as she is. I've never seen a post in her group that she doesn't actually have a response to. So if you're looking for encouragement, go join her Facebook group. And even getting back to the whole different thing, I'm so excited about our next speaker because she's going to talk about another thing that will save our marriage. Because we're different, but our problem is we want to think we're the same. We want to eat the same. We have competition. Like, wait a second, you have 15 wings, I should have 15 wings. Wait a second, you're fasting for 12 hours, that means I should fast for 12 hours. Or you're doing a 72-hour fast, that means I have to fast. But there's a problem. I'm a man, and she's a woman.
Yes, we're different, but that has been something that we've struggled with because you think as a partner in this, my partner needs to do everything the same in order for us to have a happy partnership. And I'm so excited about our next speaker because she's going to be talking about something that's important to all of us, which is fasting, but she's going to be breaking it out between the genders because we do even need to fast differently, and that is so exciting to talk about. So let us introduce Cynthia Thurlow. She's a nurse practitioner, CEO and founder of the Everyday Wellness Project, an international speaker with over 10 million views for her second TEDx talk, Intermittent Fasting, Transformational Technique. With over 20 years of experience in health and wellness, Cynthia is a globally recognized expert in intermittent fasting and nutritional health, and has been featured on ABC, Fox 5, KTLA, CW, Medium Entrepreneur, and The Megyn Kelly Show. She was listed in Yahoo Finance as one of the 21 founders changing the way we do business. Cynthia hosts the Everyday Wellness Podcast, considered one of the 21 podcasts to expand your mind in 2021 by Business Insider. Her mission is to educate women on the benefits of intermittent fasting and overall holistic health and wellness so they feel empowered to live their most optimal lives. She's going to be speaking today about why women need to fast differently than men. It's our privilege to introduce Cynthia Thurlow.
Better? Yep. Okay. Gotta love technical difficulties. So I was saying that the two Krazy Ketos, I had the opportunity yesterday to drive up to the Redmond mines, and I really enjoyed talking with them. I had no idea they were going to be introducing everyone, so it was a kind of a nice bonus. So obviously I'm known for women and intermittent fasting, largely because of a talk I did 3 years ago. But prior to that, I did talk quite a bit about both genders and intermittent fasting. But before we talk about gender differences, one of the things that I think is so important, and let me back up a little bit, I worked for 16 years as a nurse practitioner in cardiology. I saw the net impact of metabolic inflexibility and poor metabolic health. And that is why I'm so passionate about talking to people and patients about metabolic flexibility. So we're going to take a little journey. We're going to do a little bit of statistics. I promise we will emphasize the gender differences, but there's a lot of information I think is equally as important. And so that's a lot of the focus today. Okay, I love quotes. The best of all medicines is resting and fasting. Obviously, Ben Franklin has been deceased for a long time, but fasting is not new or novel. Unfortunately, our culture would like us to believe that this is something that is new and fresh. And I remind people it dates back to biblical times. This has been part of us from an ancestral health perspective for thousands of years. Okay. What I like to speak about is this public health crisis that we're dealing with. It is important, not just for clinicians, but every one of us to focus in on the fact that 1 billion people worldwide are obese. According to the World Health Association organization, rates have tripled since 1976. 42% of Americans are obese, exacerbated by the pandemic. I was looking at these statistics when I was making these slides, and has increased by 26% since 2008. A survey by the American Psychological Association pandemic averaged 30 pounds of weight gain, with a median of 16 pounds, and 10% of us gained more than 50 pounds, largely due to sleep disturbances and alcohol use. Let that kind of be absorbed. The last 2 years have really impacted us profoundly on every single level imaginable. When we talk specifically about the United States, we have this metabolic health status. 37.9% of men, 41.1% of women in the US are obese, twice as many as 3 decades ago. 20% of children are overweight, 3 times as many as 3 decades ago. When I was growing up 1,000 years ago, back in the 70s and 80s, you didn't see obese children. You really didn't. In 2020, 16 states in the United States had adult obesity rates greater than 35%. 173 million Americans are pre-diabetic, many of whom do not know. 130 million Americans are insulin resistant or diabetic. 25% of Americans have something I call NAFLD, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. High blood sugar is linked to 8 out of the top 10 leading causes of death. And when you look at the statistics and you look at where people are most vulnerable, there are systemic and social inequities. I trained in inner city Baltimore. You better believe the statistics for inner city Baltimore are very different than they are for affluent parts of the United States. I don't want this to be all negative. I just want to provide some basis for why metabolic flexibility is something we should all strive for. So when we're looking for markers, so if you're sitting in the audience, you probably have heard of something called metabolic syndrome. Obviously in cardiology, that was my bread and butter. So we know that there are gender differences that impact metabolism, and we'll talk about those shortly. We know that there is a global prevalence of more men than women that have type 2 diabetes. When you're looking at markers, so when you go to your doctor, your nurse practitioner, your PA, and you're doing your annual exam, these are things that you need to be looking at and asking for. And hopefully if you're in this room, you probably already have a great relationship with a provider. So if you are metabolically unhealthy, if you have metabolic syndrome, your HDL, if you're a man, is less than 40. For a woman, it's less than 50. Your triglycerides are going to be greater than 150. This is important because more often than not in cardiology, I'd be looking at lipid panels with patients and I would talk to them if their triglycerides were 300, 400, 500. Higher than that, we start worrying about pancreatitis, and I would ask them, what types of processed carbohydrates are you consuming? It's not a sweet potato that's going to give you high triglycerides. It's processed crap. I know Dr. Ken Berry is going to be speaking tomorrow, and I know he talks a lot about this, but it's sodas and pastries and cookies and cake and things like that that are going to really elevate those triglycerides. If your fasting glucose is greater than 100, or your fasting insulin, in my estimation, is greater than 6, you want to really be focused in on this. High blood pressure, defined right now as 130/85. And if your waist circumference as a man is greater than 45 inches or greater than 35 as a woman, this is a sign that you more than likely have got some degree of metabolic inflexibility. Okay, so how did this happen? This didn't just happen overnight. And as a clinician, over more than 20 years of practicing, I've seen a lot of changes that have impacted us on a profound level. So we talk about the rise of the processed food industry. It's a $100 trillion per year with $450 billion in profit. They are not looking out for anyone. No one. They are profit focused. They are not health focused. Our portions have gotten bigger. I call it portion distortion. Oftentimes when you leave the United States, maybe we haven't been able to do that as much over the last several years. You look at other countries, when a meal is served to you, it's half the size of what you get in restaurants. We're becoming more sedentary. 1 in 4 Americans sits greater than 8 hours a day. My greatest pain point, meal frequency, snacks and mini meals. We've been telling our patients for years, eat to stoke your metabolism. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. You need to eat 3 meals a day and snacks in between to stabilize your blood sugar. Consumption of highly processed foods, including seed oils. Seed oils are vegetable oils, canola oil. You think about soybean oil, sugar and soy. And frankly, a lack of prioritization for nutrition research by the federal government has not helped things. And I'm going to talk about one strategy that can help all of this. Who in here already intermittent fasts? Awesome. Okay. So why fasting is invaluable for metabolic health. Now, many of you might be looking at the mitochondria graphic that's on here and saying, I have no idea what this is. Our mitochondria are the powerhouses of our cells. They get damaged over time. If you're north of 40 years old, you very likely have dysfunctional mitochondria. But fasting is one of many ways that we can improve the mitochondria. When we fast, we actually will use the ability, once we're metabolically flexible, we will be able to tap into fat stores for energy. We use the term fat oxidation, but the way, kind of layman's way of looking at it is it helps you burn fat. And there's a really cool way of looking at fat. Fat isn't just fat. Fat is this incredibly sophisticated inflammatory process. Now, most adipose or fat tissue is white fat, but we can actually transition fat from the white fat that's inflammatory and non-beneficial, we can actually make it brown fat, which is metabolically active. And we can do that while fasting. I know that Dr. Letsky already talked about the importance of the gut microbiome. Well, fasting is critically helpful and beneficial for gut health. So we talk about it helps with the gut microbiome balance, aligns with circadian biology. One thing that I didn't touch on is that we have circadian clocks, not just in our brain, but throughout our gut. This is why eating within 3 hours of bedtime is not particularly helpful, not only for sleep, but also for blood sugar, because we become more physiologically insulin resistant as the day goes on. So I always talk about how fasting can be very beneficial for aligning with chronobiology. We know that fasting helps with the small intestine. We have this amazing system called the migrating motor complex in our guts, that the only way that it is really working efficiently, it kind of works like a sweet sweeper. The best way that it works is when we are not eating with meal frequency. It actually needs 4 to 5 hours for it to work properly. We know it also, our gut microbiome is critically important for neurotransmitter. Our last speaker, we heard her talking about how she had crippling depression, even as a child and young adult. And so the gut microbiome is critically involved with neurotransmitter production, serotonin, dopamine, etc. We know that when we help to enhance the mitochondrial function, it improves our energy. So many people, when they're new to intermittent fasting, will say, I came to intermittent fasting to change body composition. I came to lose weight, but I stayed because I felt so damn good. I know we're getting a little technical here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide because what I want to spend more time on is the gender differences. So there's a lot of technical terminology that goes along with intermittent fasting. We talk about the role of NAD, which is a form of gas that we can use for these proteins called sirtuins. We know that NAD actually declines with age, and it can be improved with fasting. It can lead to more energy and more anti-aging benefits. I think a lot of people choose to focus on the physicality of fasting, and what I'd like them to focus on is all the things that go on under the hood with the body. We know that autophagy, which is this really cool term, autophagy actually allows your body in a fasted state to go in and get rid of diseased and disordered cells. Cells that could potentially go on to grow into cancers or could make you more likely to develop neurocognitive disorders. Autophagy is only upregulated when we are not eating. So when you eat, it slows this and actually ramps up another type of mechanism called mTOR. We know that fasting, people talk about all the mental clarity they have when they fast. All of a sudden they feel like they can get so much work done, they have so much mental clarity, and it's because as our body is able to go in and break down these special types of fatty acids, we get diffusion of these ketones right across the blood-brain barrier. It's called, why did I just have a brain fart? It's called beta-hydroxybutyrate. Too many B's in my brain. We know that fasting is beneficial for immunity. I know for a lot of people, we're not entirely out of this pandemic yet, but I remind people that fasting is actually incredibly supportive for immune function. You think about when animals are sick, they donate, they may drink, but they're not eating. And much like I encourage people when they're not feeling well, if you don't feel like eating, don't force yourself. Your body can do all the cellular work behind the scenes. We know that fasting also reduces inflammation and actually helps slow aging. Okay, by pure irony, Dr. Ben Bikman, who I think everyone in this room is probably very well aware of, I'm a huge fan of his, when we talk about insulin, when we're talking about fasting, we're going to talk about insulin. And so his quote is a humble hormone from the pancreas. So Dr. Ben Bikman is an insulin researcher, very, very well-regarded expert in the metabolic health space. And so what I want you to remember, if you're not already fasting, or if you've been thinking about it, or if you've been a seasoned faster, to really understand that meal frequency can impact fat storage. If your insulin levels are up, then you're not able to tap into fat storage. If your insulin levels are down, then your body is able to intrinsically go in and use up fats. And as Ben Azadi always says, I would much rather use the fats in my body than be eating extra fats outside my body. In a 2018 study that was done pre-pandemic, obviously, UNC Chapel Hill School of Public Health, they talked about at that time 88.2% of Americans were metabolically inflexible and unhealthy. And this is particularly relevant because you just heard me talking about the pandemic and how those statistics have actually gotten worse, that we're just getting more and more metabolically inflexible. Another study with patients who fasted, they saw a 3 to 6% reduction in their blood sugar, and they saw a 20% decline in insulin events. This suggested that fasting is as effective as traditional caloric restriction at accelerating weight loss, protect heart health, and prevent type 2 diabetes. So there's so much more to fasting than just these benefits. Okay. We're getting closer to talking about the sex differences. How does fasting benefit hormones? Fasting glucose levels in plasma reflect the interplay between basal whole body glucose disposal and glucose regulation. What this is saying is you will become more insulin sensitive. When I'm first working with clients and we're talking about people who are dealing with insulin resistance or even diabetes, we start to talk about what strategies can you do to improve your metabolic health. And we think about even walking after meals, lowering your carbohydrate intake, increasing your protein intake, eating less frequently. There was a large cross-sectional study with 118 individuals that the prevalence of impaired fasting glucose was higher in men than women. I found that really interesting. There was a cohort of 8,000 Swedish men and women evaluated for insulin, and prevalence of impaired fasting glucose and diabetes was twofold higher in men compared to women. So now we're kind of weaving in these statistics about differences between men and women. And based on large cross-sectional trials, men might be more prone to insulin resistance than women. I again found this surprising. Higher glucose uptake in female skeletal muscle, which means more insulin sensitivity. We want to think about muscles as an organ of longevity. You want to maintain muscle mass as you get older, can also help with this insulin sensitivity. This is why when I'm working with women, I talk about the importance of doing strength training, not doing chronic cardio. Walking is great, and doing, if you want to do Orange Theory Fitness and that works for you, great. But one of the most important things you can do, and this is not specific to men, but for both genders, is to really make sure that you're maintaining lean muscle mass. Okay. I threw this slide in here really just to kind of be funny. Being a woman is a terribly difficult task since it consists principally of dealing with men. Now, I want to be clear. My husband's in the audience. I have all boys. I just did this as more just to kind of break things up as we're kind of transitioning into the gender specifics. Okay. As it pertains to men and women, it isn't all equal. And we'll talk about this in a second. Okay. I found this really interesting when I was preparing for this talk, the realization that a lot of research dollars that are out there, up until a certain point, so in 1977 and 1993, women of reproductive age were required to be excluded from phase 1 clinical trials because of concerns about teratogenic, which means they were concerned about the potential impact on a fetus or a pregnancy. Now, what this means is that for a long period of time, women have been left out of research studies. So when people ask me, where's the research when you're talking about these topics, I always have to remind them that a lot of research that's done on fasting, as one example, is done on rodents, it's done on men, or it's done on obese menopausal women. And so as I remind people, we need to continue to do the work so that we can better represent all women. Research, there are potential complexities, and this is actually a quote, of controlling for a woman's menstrual cycle serves as a deterrent for the inclusion of females in experimental design for both animal and human studies. I found that really interesting. There was actually a researcher who went back and was trying to find out why there were inequities about specific types of research done on women, and they started to look, there was a gender bias because having to account for a menstrual cycle was an inconvenience to the researchers. I get it. You can't control it, right? Since then, there's been increasing emphasis on the inclusion of women in clinical trials, as well as statistical analysis that specifically evaluate possible sex differences. As I stated, most research is done on lab animals, and last time I checked, our reproductive cycles are not the same, men and then menopausal women. So when I start talking to people, and obviously I just recently wrote a book talking about the differences between, or how women have to fast very differently, I always remind people that a lot of the research that's been done, there's not enough. So that is going to be forthcoming. And there are obviously a lot of clinicians, Dr. Jason Fung and I have talked about this ourselves. There's a lot of good research that's ongoing that will improve for things. So when we talk about differences between men and women, the two that I like to focus on the most are related to bone and skeletal muscle. Obviously there are other changes. There's brain physiology changes. There's changes in our immune systems, our liver, and our vasculature. But skeletal muscle in particular is of tremendous interest. Okay, so we go through puberty. This is when you start to see some significant secondary sex characteristics between both genders. We know just based on this information that females gain more body fat versus males, and men tend to gain more lean muscle. I have 2 teenage boys. I can see, the amount of muscle mass they have on them far exceeds my nieces who are the same age. Females generally tend to gain fat tissue peripherally and on their hips, and men tend to gain it the most in their waists. It's interesting. I was reading recently that most women, it takes them up to 10 years for their reproductive cycles to regulate. So when we're looking at a young woman at 12 or 13 years of age starting their menstrual cycles, it may take up to 10 years for their cycles to become regular. And actually, the research looks at their body fat has to be at about 17 to 22% for regular menstrual cycles. And for many young women, that may take quite a bit of time. Men, big gender differences. More muscle mass with higher output, higher capacity for anaerobic metabolism. They have more bone mass. It makes sense. Generally, men are heavier. They have lower body fat. And related to an impact of steroid hormones, specifically testosterone, not surprisingly, but also IGF-1. And I'll have you all know, my teenage boys looked through these slides to make sure they felt like they were both very gender balanced. Okay, for women, and there's a little bit more detail in here because we just have a little bit more complex physiology. So I talked about why skeletal muscle is so important to maintain, especially north of 40, because there's something called sarcopenia. This is not unique to women. This also happens to men. It's muscle loss with aging. As you lose lean muscle mass, you become less insulin sensitive. That is why it's so important that you're getting enough protein, that you are even doing body weight. You need to be doing strength training exercises throughout your lifetime, even more importantly as we get older. So we know that skeletal muscle is very important for insulin sensitivity. We know that there are differences in muscle mass that allow for greater flow. So it's interesting, men have more muscle mass, so they're going to maintain more insulin sensitivity than women. And women, in many ways, even though our muscles are a little bit more attuned to being insulin sensitive, until women start heading into perimenopause, the 5 to 10 years preceding menopause, and menopause, they maintain a degree of insulin sensitivity. It's as we get closer to menopause, and we'll talk about that in a second. We know there's distinct gender comparisons in the skeletal muscle that I mentioned earlier. The highest body fat deposition in women impacts circulating inflammatory particles, which can impact metabolism and skeletal muscle for receptor thinning. Now, I think the big takeaway, because I can go through these slides and I can talk all about the research, is that until women go through menopause, they maintain a certain degree of insulin sensitivity. So muscle mass becomes increasingly important. Men get a little bit of a pass. They don't lose as much muscle mass as quickly as women do as they're heading into this middle age time. So there's definitely things that can impact bone health, muscle health in our bodies. That's why it's so important that we're looking at, what we're eating in terms of nutrition, our meal frequency. We want to be maintaining strength training, etc. All are super important. Okay. I do want to touch on this topic. I think many people are aware that menopause is a phenomenon that happens. That's 12 months of a woman not having a menstrual cycle. But men actually will go through andropause. And so this is when men may find they may have decreased strength, they may have some weight gain, they may deal with sore muscles beyond which they were accustomed to. They may have low libido. The number one cause of low libido in the United States, more often than not for men, is related to insulin resistance. They may also suffer from insomnia. In a 2016 study, nearly 40% of US males had low testosterone. That impacts over 13 million men. This is important. Low testosterone is almost always correlated with either exposure to estrogen-mimicking chemicals in our environment, our personal care products, or our food, or it's directly related to insulin resistance, or it could be a combination of both. And as I mentioned, I always think about Bill Gates as a great example. Obviously, probably many people in this room know that he is pushing very much a plant-based agenda, and I don't in any way want to make this a political conversation, but if you look at how unhealthy Bill Gates looks, I always say as an example, like he would really benefit from eating a bit more meat and eating a bit more healthy fats. I'm being completely serious, but that's who I think of when I think of someone who looks like they're in significant andropause. On the other hand, with women, menopause, the average age in the United States is 51 years old. And so many women breeze through perimenopause, they have no issues. But more often than not, women will experience things like hot flashes and weight gain and low libido and muscle loss and insomnia. How many women in this room have dealt with or are dealing with insomnia? Yeah, it's a real problem. It's a catastrophic problem. And all of these symptoms can be exacerbated by insulin resistance, loss of insulin sensitivity. Remember I talked about women until we start heading into menopause are largely protected from this. And this is also exacerbated by the loss of estradiol, which is that predominant form of estrogen as we are heading into that time frame. So really important to understand that interrelationship. It also is impaired by the loss of testosterone and progesterone. And I always like women to understand that, and it happens as it also happens for men as well, that not having good quality sleep is an issue with it not being foundational to our health, that we need to sleep well to be able to maintain good insulin sensitivity. We need to sleep well to be able to replenish hormones. There's something called the glymphatic system in the brain that only gets triggered when we're asleep because it requires so much energy, but it's our body, it's like a toilet. It's like our brain literally has a toilet and it's only really clicked into when we are asleep. So important for people to understand that middle age, both men and women can have changes in their sex hormones, which can impact all of these areas. And if you're not sleeping well, you definitely want to figure out why and get some help. Okay. We were talking about this body composition with women. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on here, but this is just looking at what happens to women in menopause, that they have this increase in body fat, this reduction in insulin sensitivity related to the loss of muscle mass, and this can really get exacerbated. Okay, so what I want to spend the next 20 minutes on is the differences for fasting between men and women. And so with men, there's just one fasting bucket, and with women, there are three. There are women that are at peak fertility, under the age of 35. We've got women in perimenopause and women in menopause. And so the other piece that's always very, very important, not unique to one gender, is that our sleep quality is important, our stress management, our exercise, anti-inflammatory nutrition, and including low-carb ketogenic lifestyle if that's appropriate for you. Are you seeing the trends? Brian talked about this earlier. Really important. Lifestyle medicine is the first distinction. So if you're a woman that still gets a menstrual cycle, there is a rhythm called the infradian rhythm. It's a 28-day cycle, ideally. And you have multiple stages during your menstrual cycle. There's the follicular phase, which is the day that you start bleeding until roughly day 14. There's ovulation, which should happen around day 15 or 16. And then day 17 through day 28 is the luteal phase. And throughout your menstrual cycle, a woman is getting fluctuations in energy and temperature and metabolism and both her glucose and insulin sensitivity. It impacts cortisol. It also impacts sleep quality. More often than not, I have women tell me, I sleep terribly the week before my menstrual cycle, and that is a byproduct for the fluctuations in progesterone. I have women that wear CGMs and use glucometers that tell me the first part of my menstrual cycle, I'm a rock star. I can lift heavy, I can eat what I want within a healthy range, but then as I get closer to getting my menstrual cycle, I crave certain foods. My glucometer and my CGM data is a total hot mess, and that is a byproduct of those sex hormones, progesterone and estradiol, that are fluctuating. Now, I mentioned that we have these distinctions. So under the age of 35 is one bucket. Perimenopause is 5 to 10 years preceding menopause, and I just said the average age in the United States of menopause is 51. Late 30s, early 40s is when perimenopause starts. And this is important for women to understand. I say this because I did a whole TED Talk on it as an aside, that I was not prepared as a clinician for the changes that were going to happen. So I have teenagers at home. Their puberty has been ramping up, and mine has been ramping down. It's reverse puberty. But no one prepares you for this. And so as you transition, as you're getting closer and closer to menopause, you will start generally having more and more symptoms. And so this is when I tell women, you have to sleep. If you are not sleeping through the night, please do not add in intermittent fasting, because we want to make sure that you can maintain healthy blood sugar, that you're getting restful sleep, because intermittent fasting, although a very beneficial strategy and something that has been with us since the millennium, it is absolutely a type of stress. We use this term hormesis. It is a type of beneficial stress in the right amount at the right time that can be hugely impactful. So if you're not sleeping, your stress is out of control, you're going through a divorce, you're going through a major move, you lost your job, you have a child that's ill, etc., do not add in intermittent fasting. Maybe take a break. The nutrition piece. I think that this is the lost art. One of the reasons why I left clinical medicine 6 years ago to start my business was because I felt like we were failing our patients. I did not have enough time to talk to my patients about food. My cardiology fellows were always very supportive of my desire to talk about food, but it got to a point where I said it all starts with food. That's what we're not talking enough about, that it all starts with food. You can make the best choices or the worst choices every day of your life. And then exercise. We have to move our bodies. I'm not saying everyone in this room needs to do CrossFit. I don't do CrossFit. It's not the right type of exercise at this point in my body and at this point in my life. However, walking. Everyone can walk. Just about everyone can walk. Making sure that you are doing some type of body weight training. Really making sure you're doing the right type of exercise based on where you are in your lifetime. I have a lot of women that are in their early 50s and they want to continue to do Orange Theory Fitness or CrossFit, and they're wondering why they can't recover, and they're exhausted and their sleep is terrible and they're really inflamed. And I remind them what a 22-year-old woman can get away with is not what a 52-year-old woman can get away with. And in many ways, it's a relief, right? You know, you're at a much more secure, comfortable stage in your life, but it's the understanding it's the right types of exercise at the right time of your life. Okay, so men and menopausal women. Why do menopausal women have it a little bit easier than their counterparts who are still getting menstrual cycles? There's less hormonal flux. There is not this fluctuating amounts of progesterone and testosterone and estradiol every month. When you are in menopause, you've gone 12 months without a menstrual cycle. A lot of women are like, thank God, one less thing to worry about. So less hormonal flux with fasting. That's why menopausal women and men oftentimes have the easiest time doing it. Men statistically tend to lose body fat more easily. This is a source of endless frustration. But remember what I already said earlier. It is. I mean, I say, like, women will say, my husband's doing the same thing I'm doing, and he's lost 10 pounds, and I've lost 2, or I've lost none. And what did we talk about earlier? Men tend to have more muscle mass, and we tend to have more body fat. It is going to take a little longer. Menopausal women have to focus in on sleep quality and stress and nutrition and exercise and doing the right types in the right amount. I always mention that menopausal women and even perimenopausal women have to be careful about their carbohydrate intake. I'm not anti-carb, let me be very clear. But some women really struggle to understand that it might be that they aren't doing gluten anymore, they're not doing grains anymore. It's really being, very strategic about, do you tolerate, fruit? Can you have low glycemic berries? That's why I think glucometers and CGMs are so beneficial, but it's getting honest with yourself. I have some patients that cannot have fruit at all. They don't have enough insulin sensitivity. I have others that can. So really identifying for you what that right food is. Most men and women eat not enough protein, too much of the wrong types of fats, and too many carbs. That is standard American diet, rhetoric. Now, when I encourage men and women to have more animal-based protein, the right types of fats, and eating the appropriate amount of carbohydrates for who they are, they do a whole lot better. Okay, I think it's important to talk about who should not fast. Now, I see a lot of people, I have to believe they're well-meaning fit pros. I'm going to pick on the fit pros for a second. Well-meaning fit pros on Instagram who like to proudly show off that they fasted through all of their pregnancies and while breastfeeding. And let me be real. If you are growing a human or breastfeeding a human, this is not the time to restrict the food that you're consuming. This is the one time I always say that for me, I had a cousin who was an OBGYN, and she said, when you are breastfeeding a child, it is like you can eat like a linebacker. I now understand that concept, having had 2 children who are now teenagers and eat like linebackers. But that is not the time to be restricting the macros that you're consuming. So wait until you're done being pregnant or done breastfeeding. A lot of women, I get this question a lot on social media as well, history of a disordered relationship with food, particularly binge eating, bulimia, and anorexia. Now, when I did my training many years ago in Baltimore, I did have a lot of clinical time at a hospital called Shepherd Pratt, which is an eating disorder facility. And so I got to train with a lot of fellows that were working in this area. Anorexia has one of the lowest cure rates of all the eating disorders. And so I find a lot of women that have a history of anorexia, it's a very tough thing for them to be able to tolerate, and I generally don't recommend it. Have I had women that have worked with me that have a history of binge eating and bulimia and a few with anorexia that in conjunction with working with an eating disorder specialist have been able to dip their toe in that pond? Yes, but it's not the most common individual. So just to kind of tuck that in the back of your mind, if you're too thin, if your BMI is less than 18, you have no business fasting, male or female. Children and teens. I have a teenager. My husband's in the audience, so he'll be humored to hear me say this. I have a teenager who's a competitive swimmer, and he does not like to eat breakfast. So we have to talk about how he can get enough food in during his day to be able to fuel his workouts and his brain to be able to excel at school, but I don't recommend kids fast. Now, does he eat within a compressed window because he doesn't eat? But he eats so much food. Remember I said he's like the linebacker. It's unbelievable. If someone's frail or elderly, I made a mistake in 2019 when I did my second TED Talk talking about people over the age of 75 or 70, and I got a lot of flack. And it was because I was required by the event where I was speaking at to give a number. And I have since been graciously humbled by the amount of individuals who have done very well fasting into their 70s and beyond. So it's always in the context, are you frail? You could be frail and be 40 years old. So are you frail, or are you someone that's, in a position where you have brittle diabetes, you don't know what your blood sugar is doing? If you lack that awareness, then you have to actually be very careful. If you're recently hospitalized, I think this goes without saying. And, best practice, if you are considering fasting and you're on a lot of medications, maybe you see a cardiologist, maybe you see a nephrologist, a kidney doctor, or pulmonologist, have a conversation. I'm finding more and more healthcare professionals are really open to the concept of allowing their patients to fast safely. You do want to, if you take blood pressure medication, if you're on diabetes medication, you want to make sure they are aware, because you more than likely will need less medication. And that's a beautiful thing. That's what we want. We want to see our patients coming off of these lifestyle medications as much as possible. Okay, so if maybe you're not doing fasting, if we're doing like a down and dirty, these are the easy ways to be able to fast effectively. The first thing you do, and some people in this room may not need to hear this, but the first thing I would say, rip the Band-Aid off and stop snacking. Like, no one should be snacking. The concept of snacking is so detrimental to our health. And then once you stop snacking, you want to start with a 12-hour feeding window. Really, you don't eat between dinner and breakfast. And you might have already go 13 or 14 hours successfully. I always remind people that what will happen when you are no longer snacking is it will force you to structure your meals differently. We know protein is the most satiating macronutrient. And what that means is that if you are properly putting your macros together at your meals, protein, fats if appropriate, non-starchy carbs, then you will not be hungry in between meals. I always say when someone says to me, I feel like I need a snack in between my meals, I said, then you need to push the protein lever, or you need to add more healthy fats. If you're having a ribeye, you don't need to add more fats to your plate. If you're having a filet, you can add some fats to your plate. It's really that simple. Push the protein lever. You want to also reduce your carbohydrate intake. Now, again, in this audience, they might not need to hear it as much as a lot of audiences that I speak to. People freak out. The average American is consuming 200 to 300 grams of carbs a day, and not from vegetable sources or a piece of fruit. They're having the processed carbs. So getting your total carbs under 75 or 50 grams is a good starting point, especially if you're trying to lose weight. Absolutely important. And, one of the things that I get asked about a lot is total versus net carbs. I always say net carbs is a cheat. As long as you recognize that's what it is. If they put a lot of fiber into something in an effort to get you to believe that it isn't as many carbohydrates as you're consuming, be honest with yourself. Lily's dark chocolate is a good example, right? Lily's dark chocolate, stevia sweetened chocolate, might be a little bit easier, less, insulin response or blood sugar response. And I always tell people, actually record the whole total carbohydrates. Don't say it's 20. Instead of saying it's 14, it's really 28. Call it what it is. Understanding what a clean fast is. A lot of people don't understand what a clean fast is. They think they can eat and drink anything they want. They're, again, the fit pros. I'll pick on them. A lot of people on social media, they'll say if it's under 50 calories, it doesn't count. That's actually not true. If you're eating food, that's actually breaking your fast. Like grapes or banana, there was someone the other day that was saying that, and I took everything I could not to say anything about what they were talking about. So really, that's as easy as you can go. Now, the other thing about protein that I want to mention that is going to help you succeed with intermittent fasting is pushing that envelope. And I talk about 30 to 40 grams as a starting point. I actually had someone reach out to me who's in the fasting space who told me that wasn't achievable. And I said, really? I said, because I eat 40 or 50 grams in a meal. And I eat at least 2 meals a day, if not more, depending on what's my schedule's like. So if I'm having 50 grams of protein in a steak, you're going to try to say, like, that's impossible for us to be able to achieve. I think that's ridiculous. Remember, protein will shut that satiety cues. You won't be looking for more food because you will be too darn full. Okay. I think it's important in the last 5 minutes to talk about signs that fasting's not working for you. Because I get questions about these every day. In fact, my team was laughing about this because there were so many of these that came in overnight. Okay, if your sleep is good and you start fasting and then your sleep becomes terrible, guess what? You need to back up the bus. There might be something going on. Maybe you're not getting enough food into your feeding window. Maybe there's something else going on for you. Maybe it's the time in your menstrual cycle where you should not be fasting. And I talk about this a lot in my book that just came out, but as a caveat to this, when women are still getting their menstrual cycle every month, you should not be fasting the 5 to 7 days preceding your cycle. That doesn't mean you don't do 12 hours of digestive rest. That just means you're not doing a 20-hour fast. You're not doing a 24-hour fast. More often than not, the poor quality sleep is a direct reflection of the changes in progesterone. If you start fasting and your energy goes south, it's a sign that it's not working for you. It doesn't mean forever. It could be that your adrenals are taking a hit. Maybe your thyroid isn't doing well. Something you definitely have to be focused and conscientious about. Same thing with fatigue. You should have more energy with fasting, not less. That's definitely a sign that something is not working effectively. Poor cognition or brain fog, this can be from a lot of different things, but if you're not feeling that boost in cognition, that mental clarity, the feeling like you can get so many things done, you may need to take a break or reevaluate what you're doing. If you start getting weight gain, a lot of women will talk about the cortisol belly. They'll all of a sudden say, I don't understand why I've gained all this weight. And I remind them we have 40 times more cortisol receptors around our abdomen. So if you're stressed out, guess what? That's where you're going to gain the weight. So that's a cortisol belly. Last but not least, something that I take very seriously, especially in my under 35 women, loss of your menstrual cycle. I think the menstrual cycle for a woman is a barometer of your health. Whether you're in perimenopause or menopause, perimenopause or your peak fertility years, if you lose your menstrual cycle, it is definitely a sign that something is off. And it could be that maybe you're fasting too long, maybe you're fasting too frequently. It's really important, and I take that very, very seriously as a sign that something is not working effectively for you. Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to have a little Q&A. Are you ready to ask some questions of these lovely speakers from this morning?
I have a question.
Yes.
How many people got a phone number, a text message, an Instagram message
extra brownie
name
points.
early when we said find a friend? Did anybody find a friend yet?
All right.
There we go.
So
that's going to be your challenge at lunch is find a friend. Kim talked about it as well, right? We need to find a friend.
Find some community.
Okay?
So
a lot of us don't have it at home.
We're going to get some chairs up here for our speakers, and we are going to have a microphone.
So what we're going to do is they're going to have a microphone. We're going to have you guys line up. I don't know, Chris, where you want to have them line up, maybe down this center island. And then we'll come down there, and we're going to ask you, if you have a question, try to keep it brief without a huge backstory because we want to get as many questions as possible and one question per person.
Yeah,
okay?
So we're going to have just for the next 20 minutes. So we'll go ahead and head down here.
Did you want to do stools or?
Are you guys walking with those mics out there for them or no?
Okay.
Yeah, we'll just.
How are we ordering?
Let's give a hand for them.
Okay, so if you have a question, you can. I guess we can make a line right here. This way, the speakers can see you.
Don't be shy. They're just as excited to talk to you as you are to talk to them. Is that correct?
Of course.
Yes, absolutely.
So does anybody have a question?
Oh, we've got one over here.
Okay. You want to come up here?
Yeah.
Let me come over to you.
Intermittent fasting. Does it matter if you if you eat in the morning and do your window then and not eat late? Or does it really matter just as long as you have your window?
It's a great question. Yes?
Just keep talking.
Okay, I'm just going to talk really loud. If you look at research on chronobiology and how it aligns, we become more physiologically insulin resistant as the day goes on. So if you feel better having a meal, later than an hour after waking up, and you maybe have a meal at 9 and maybe at 2, that is going to be better than if you're having, a meal later in the day into the evening that's going to mess up your circadian biology. And so remember I mentioned there are these melatonin clocks in our guts. And so my Oura Ring has been screaming at me since we've been here because I'm an East Coaster, and a lot of it's because I'm 2 hours adjusted from where I normally eat, even though it's local time. And so to answer your question, I think it's fine if that's what works for you. I get that question a lot. I think it's really dependent on you and your lifestyle, but everyone understanding that insulin sensitivity is something that changes throughout the day. So early in the day, you're going to be more insulin sensitive than you are as the day goes on, as it gets darker.
Any more questions?
This is for Dave. Oh boy, you got 2 microphones. On your study where you're doing the CT angiogram and all the labs and stuff, have you ever done any coronary artery calcium testing? Have you ever included that?
Actually, not a lot of people know this, but when you get a CT angiogram, you kind of get a bonus coronary artery calcification score. So what they have to do is they hook you up to where you can take what's known as contrast dye. But before they put the contrast dye in you, you do a first scan, and in that first scan, they pick up any amount of calcification, and that's how they know what dosage to use for the actual CCTA. And so at that point, the contrast dye comes in, and that kind of allows for them to be able to see your lumen, the blood vessels throughout, and then they can actually map the full geography. So anybody getting a CT angiogram, you get a CAC along with it. It's really a great test, in my opinion, particularly now that the radiation dosage is so much lower on a lot of these modern machines.
Can I add part 2 to that?
Sure, go ahead.
So have you ever seen anybody with significant elevation in their calcium score not have any coronary artery disease, blockages?
Well, first of all, this isn't so much my wheelhouse. I don't really look at a lot of these scans often. There are a lot that are shared to me because of the nature of where I'm at and with my research and so forth. But it's what we would call convenience sampling, right? So it's people volunteering things to me. I'm not going to be able to provide as strong of a broader perspective. But as best as I can with all of that caveating, I will say this: generally speaking, if you have a higher CAC, you probably also have a higher total amount of soft plaque as well. That's generally going to be the case. Usually, calcification is later stage of the development of plaque. But that said, there's a recent study that I think was from a couple months ago. Really fantastic. Look in my Twitter feed. I did like a mega thread on it, and it showed just how prognostically, how predictively powerful CAC was, because in spite of whether or not it's a later stage, it's not like people get, or at least per the study, it's not like there was a massive amount of people who had soft plaque and no calcification. Oftentimes you will get the calcification as kind of part of that, and it shows up to the degree that it can really be very predictive of your likely cardiovascular disease outcomes, much more so than LDL cholesterol. Per this very study. And they were even looking at folks that had an LDL cholesterol of 190 milligrams per deciliter or higher. Anyway, if you can, just do a search in my name and mega thread, and I go on for quite a ways on. It's a really great study.
I'm curious as to if that holds for exercisers who see calcification in the LAD, for example. But my actual question is regarding the insulin sensitivity and circadian rhythm thing. Do you think that would hold for carnivores who just aren't eating carbohydrates, assuming they're not eating seafood, which has trace amounts? Would it matter as much?
I have to be honest with you. I mean, I'm down a rabbit hole right now preparing for another talk, so I'm knee deep in the chronobiology research far more than I ever wanted to be. And so I think it's more about understanding that physiologically what's going on with the body, as these circadian rhythms are aligned with our chronobiology, that I think that eating at night, based on what I'm reading, and eating within 3 to 4 hours of bedtime can be potentially detrimental. I mean, I was using the example of myself at the end of one, that, you know, being here and being 2 hours off my normal schedule, my aura has been barking at me. It's been adjusting all those scores, and I'm insulin sensitive, and so I ate a big steak last night, and I ate a big steak the night before, and still kind of struggling with, you know, keeping my numbers where they need to be. Obviously, it's unique to each one of us, because each one of us has our own kind of metabolic flexibility factors. But obviously, carnivore is going to be a diet that I have found personally and professionally that people generally do very well on. But again, it's the meal frequency and timing piece as it's getting closer to, you know, dark that can be impactful.
This question is for Cynthia. Everyone's asking fast-getting questions, but is there an ideal window that you should have when it comes to fasting? So, like, I do about a 16-8, but is there something that we should be, like, aspiring to? That's my question.
That's a great question. My general feeling is once you've got the training wheels off and you're fasting regularly, much like we don't eat the same foods every day, we don't do the same exercise every day, I do like to see a variation of that fasting window. And so a lot of it depends on where you are in your menstrual cycle. A lot of it depends on your stress and your sleep. When we're more metabolically flexible, I find that people can lean into a little bit of metabolic, you know, that intuitive eating, like, okay, today I need to break my fast earlier. You know, I'm much hungrier. So I think a lot of it depends on, you know, the lifestyle piece as well. But I do like to see variations because our bodies, you know, they get complacent and lazy if we're doing the same thing every time. So maybe varying with, depending on where you are in your menstrual cycle, because from here I can't differentiate. Like, I can't see any ages from here with my glasses being off. But like kind of leaning, I know I'm admitting to the fact I need to wear my glasses. But I would say, you know, variation in your fasting window is going to be beneficial.
Hi. For anyone who wants to have input, but Dr. Lindsay, you mentioned that there was research that talked about people who have had bariatric surgery and having issues in their gut biome. Can you elaborate? And because as someone who has had it, and I was successful, I lost 100 pounds, and I was really at a great place in my life. Thank you. But then I just really felt a lot of fatigue suddenly in my gut area, and felt like, you know, felt like this pulling, and it was just distress. Like, it was a lot of different things going on. And before even though I was working out and eating clean, and I really felt a lot of, I started basically gaining the weight back. And no one really could tell me. The bariatric doctors couldn't. The gastroenterologists, they kept ping-ponging back off of each other. And so I actually asked that question, is anyone doing research to see how, you know, how the surgery might affect someone's gut health? Is there anything, because I felt like it's taken so much time for me to heal. I'm not even sure what I did. So if there's any way you can elaborate.
Yeah, I think it's so complicated. You know, one thing, what I was referring to was post-surgery immediately, gut microbiome changes. Fasting, gut microbiome changes. If you eat a terrible diet, gut microbiome changes. So the microbiome's changing according to what we're eating. So some people may say, well, when you eat this way, you don't have as much diversity, right? And that may be an issue. But a lot of it could be vitamin, you know, there's studies showing that certain microbiome will make B vitamins or vitamin D and help you in these things, or neurotransmitters even. So I think, I don't think we know the right answer, but I think what we're seeing is once that gut microbiome shifts back, we see the same thing, for instance, on a liquid diet. If we never fix the underlying problem and you're eating 500 calories of processed food, it's gonna be a lot different than if you're eating a ketogenic or a carnivore diet in the long run, because your microbiome is going back to where it was, and that's telling your brain to eat more. And there's studies showing, for instance, it's interesting, a podcast that's coming out on Monday on Low Carb MD. We interviewed a gastroenterologist talking about when they do fecal transplants, and they follow up with the people afterwards. The people who received the transplant, they'll start craving what the donor craved. Like, they crave kimchi and sauerkraut instead of donuts now, right? And so it's really interesting how much of an impact. I think it's so much in the infancy that we don't understand enough, but we're seeing that. For instance, there's a law that you can't, if you're obese, you can't donate gut microbiome to help people that have colitis, for instance, because there's athletes who start gaining 80 pounds all of a sudden. It's not like they all of a sudden got lazy and fatigued and started eating terrible. So it's frustrating when you go through something like that. It could be that your brain's just not getting a nutrition that it needs, and it's asking for more food and more food before it shuts off that satiety. But it's all speculation at this point. I don't think we have enough data on that yet.
I see you, sir. I'm heading your way. I like a bald man. I'm not going to lie. Heading towards the bald man like every day of my life.
Hi, I'm not sure who could best answer this or how much I'll understand the answer. About 8 months ago, my wife introduced me to keto. In the first 3 months, I lost 30 pounds. What I enjoyed more than that was the discomfort I had in some of my joints has gone. Pre-diabetic, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. I want to see a change in those, and so I can get off the meds. So I guess my question is that an automatic? If it is, how long does it take? I was a locomotive engineer for a career, no medical background, so if you could maybe limit your answer to 2 or 3 medical terms, it would be greatly appreciated.
I think your question is, how long does it take to come off the meds? Yeah, you know, it does vary by individuals, but lowering that insulin, so getting a baseline insulin to see where you're at is very helpful, right? And depending on how strict you are, some people we've had them do really well and they're still struggling with high blood pressure, you know, doing well with losing weight and all those things. With the inflammation, it's very interesting. Ben Bickman, you know, my first patient, she was scheduled for a total knee replacement, poorly controlled diabetic, and we got her on a low carb diet, and everything got better because I couldn't clear her for surgery. Her 3-month sugar average was too high. It was too dangerous. So I said, we're going to have to wait. So 6 weeks later, she dropped her A1C somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 points. Like incredible, like just changing her lifestyle. But I said, I'll clear you for surgery. And then she said, well, my knee doesn't hurt anymore, right? Because we're seeing this with the inflammation. And so over time, as we decrease that inflammation, decrease the insulin, increase activity level, you know, hopefully we just slowly watch that and we'll start tapering medicines down slowly. You know, but there's not a magic formula that 3 weeks in you're going to come off all your meds, basically.
I have to laugh. I'm married to an engineer, so as soon as you said I'm an engineer, I understand. I think this is a term, bioindividuality rules, like Brian said. I think a lot of it depends. Like you may need some more blood work to kind of get a sense for how insulin, whether you're insulin sensitive or a little insulin resistant, that can help mitigate. I've seen people that within 6 weeks, they're on lower doses of antihypertensive, blood pressure medicines, diabetes medications, et cetera. And then I have other people that it's taken months and months, and a lot of it is reflective of what else is going on, like what's your stress level like, what's your sleep like, what nutritional choices are you making, are the little bit of dietary indiscretions that are impacting, you know, your results. I mean, that can all play a role for sure.
And I'd like to say, too, that with no medical terms whatsoever involved, that in my clients I see such a wide range, but one of the things I think is really pivotal is how important it is to realize that keto improves so many things, low carb, and one of the things it does is it can clear away the things that can be improved, that are being caused by your diet. But there are some medical things that aren't diet related, and so it sets this foundation because there's so much noise, right? I've got 20 things wrong with me and I'm on 20 different medications, if I can get rid of 10 of them, you know, we can actually attack that with my doctor in a way that's effective now because I figured out that my blood pressure actually is related to some other condition, and I thought it was going to be the weight loss, but now we can actually see what it's related to, right? So it's really a process, and for some people it's fast, and I just want to encourage you that for a lot of my clients it's slow, and that's not how we wish it sometimes, but constant incremental improvements are lifestyle based, but also it's the same thing in our health. It's just, it takes its time.
Sir, you had a question?
So I do more public policy research, and of course the obvious question is why doesn't this spread more quickly? Because it saves so much money in addition to suffering. And so there's a big move of the healthcare, the health sharing accounts that they defined under Obamacare as not being insurance. So I had Liberty Health Shares for a number of years. There's many others that are sort of linked to a religion, but they're not tied to the medical establishment. You'd think they would be promoting ways to lose weight and improve chronic conditions because they're directly sharing those fees from, they're not in the medical establishment. And I wonder if you had any data on that, or even companies that are self-providing their own medical insurance being interested in this.
So I will say there at a conference a few years ago, I think it was Low Carb Denver, I think he was from Deutsche Bank. I'm trying to remember, but they are life insurance people. And is that who it was? Swiss Re, there we go. All right, well, I will find it this weekend and I will let you know. But if Swiss Re was doing a study, and so there is some investigation. It's not from the health insurers, though. It seems like it might be the life insurers that are more interested.
Yeah, it's complicated. Being one that was in the system for 18 years and leaving, there's a vested interest. The problem is the insurance companies, say Blue Cross is for an example, they get paid more by the government the sicker the patient gets. Because the reasoning is the sicker the patient is, the more time it's going to take. And my argument was the more time I spend with my patient, the less sick they get, right? But there's not that upfront investment because they're thinking, look, we're going to invest all this time and money up front, and then they're going to change insurance anyways at some point, and we're never going to see the benefit. That's the thinking. So you're right. It's these smaller groups like CHM, Christian Healthcare Ministries. They're going to have a vested interest in taking people off meds, preventing the complications, because that's where the money goes. Problem is there's more money coming in, the more complications in the standard insurance model, and that's something we have to address for sure before we can really make some headway into this.
I think we have time for one more question, and I saw your hand up on the last one.
So I've worked nights 30 years. I've been trying to do the intermittent fasting, and I was just wondering, does that interfere like with the circadian rhythm and all of that? Night shift, yes. Night shift nurse.
I heard that part, and I was like, oh gosh, like my eyes are not working and my ears are falling apart. It's interesting. I actually wrote an article for, I think it was a nursing journal like 2 or 3 years ago talking about this. And so, when you really like dig, and I'm knee deep in the circadian biology research, we know that individuals that are doing shift work like long term, there's a lot of health implications. And so obviously, you can, if you want to fast, you can absolutely do it. In fact, I had a NICU doctor who's in Atlanta who was convinced he could not do it because he worked nights. And I have him fasting, just with gentle cues over Twitter. And so I think it's certainly viable. It's like, but also it's the understanding of the challenges of, maybe starting with the days that you're not working shift work and becoming successful, and then, extending your fast. Maybe you're eating your dinner at 5 o'clock at night and going in at 7 o'clock at night for your shift, and then, kind of going that direction. I'm not sure if you have more you want to.
I would just say the same. I think when we look at the data, you look at police officers, firemen, they're under stress. Night nurses, shift work, changing from day to night, suicide rates, all these things go up. And, even police officers, I think the average longevity after retirement is 5 years before you die, right? So you don't get to enjoy your retirement plans. So I think that there's a lot to that. And we know the night shifts, nurses are generally heavier than the day shift, right? Because you're trying to stay awake, so you're eating to stay awake, and you're stressed, and it's that perfect combination. When I was in residency, I told my wife, I said, I know they're going to come up with data that shows if you're stressed and sleep deprived, you're going to be starving the next day, and we have tons of data on that now. So it's hard when you're changing shifts back and forth. I think is more difficult, but it's hard because the circadian rhythms are so important. Yeah.
Can I just fit in one more thing, because it's kind of funny since we talked about intermittent fasting a lot. 2 years ago, I did an eating window experiment. You can actually look it up, where I had my baseline diet, which is the same thing I have with every one of my experiments. It's 5 hours apart. It's like 9, 2, and 7, I think, is my baseline diet. And I did that for 5 days. And then I started an eating window where I would compress all 3 of those meals, same exact calories, everything. And I figured to make it easier so that I would have the same fasting window, I just compressed them up to the evening. So I think I started at 3 and went to 7, and it was a complete disaster. It was terrible. My sleeping was horrible. I also just found myself getting hot in the evening. I couldn't, not only could I not sleep well, but I woke up in a fog, etc. I realized I needed to change the experiment immediately and moved it to closer to the around noon. It actually ended up being about 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. and it was, excuse the pun, night and day. Entirely different experiment. And for the first time, I actually felt like intermittent fasting was possible because I never feel like I can fast. I feel like I want to snack more than most people would talk about it. But once I compressed the amount of calories that I would be normally eating in a day inside of that 4.5-hour window, it suddenly became possible. And that also ended up influencing more than ever before I really have a drive now that whatever I'm doing fasting-wise, whether I'm doing intermittent fasting, because I generally am not, I will at least have a hard rule that I'm not going to eat within 3 to 4 hours from when I go to sleep. If I can just hold to that one rule, then I can forget a lot of the other things, and it does help a lot. Don't always hold to it, but I try, and that experiment made a big difference for me.
That's incredible. I would say the other piece is I have a lot of advanced practice nurses who were patients of mine, and many of them, once they were in perimenopause and menopause, could not tolerate the night shift going back and forth. It was just, I put CGMs on all of them, and they just started to monitor. They were like, holy cow, I had no idea the blood sugar dysregulation that I'm experiencing with the amount of stress and the lack of sleep and the changes in hormones. So, you know, I always say knowledge is power, and kind of like lean into that and find what works best for you.
Well, thank you. So I think you guys just summed up every problem that I currently have in my eating lifestyle. I sleep for 4 to 5 hours at most. I am on a lacrosse field till 9 or 10 o'clock at night. I eat when I get home from my games. So it's like, these are definitely things I need to work on. I don't know about the rest of you guys, if you've learned anything, but it was definitely eye-opening for me. Okay, so we are going to take a lunch break right now. We're going to come back at 1:25. You definitely want to try to get back here a little bit earlier so you don't miss anything. Also, if you are a Patreon member for Dr. Berry, he is going to have like a little quick get-together for his patrons in the back room over there, and that will be at 1 p.m. Okay, so can we give all of our speakers here a round of applause? Thank you so much. Yep. Cynthia's got another question real quick, another comment.
I meant to say that at the end of my presentation, I'm going to be signing books over in the other room. So if anyone's interested in getting Intermittent Fasting Transformation, which is a women's book for fasting, I will be signing books. So please meet us after lunch.
Thank you so much.